Hey, this is David, and we just heard about the passing of the legendary Tina Turner way back in 2021 when we started this podcast. Her documentary, Tina, was one of the first that we reviewed. We love Tina Turner. She was incredible. Yeah, the documentary is available on HBO Max or Max or whatever it's called now. We just wanted to put this back out as a little tribute to her, for those who are thinking about her and enjoy her music and everything she brought to the world today. We love you, Tina. Rest in peace. And here was our conversation about the Tina documentary from a couple years ago. Welcome to Rock Docs, a podcast about movies about music. I'm David Lizabram, here with
Andrew Keats.
And today we are going to talk about Tina, which is a documentary about Tina Turner. Before we get to that, though,
this is a bit of a layup, actually. I think we could say that we're actually getting into the movie now.
Okay.
So I have a question for you. I might get canceled for this. I should have saved this to the end. Okay. So I hope everybody doesn't have some delicate sensibilities. Maybe you can handle some truth talking.
Yeah, I think this podcast is part of the intellectual dark web.
Yeah.
Exactly. So obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't call myself like part of the alt-right, but I am going to say this.
Okay.
I think Come Together by Ike and Tina is better than Come Together by the Beatles.
Okay.
Okay. So I hope you guys...
Are you going to make this case, or are you just going to let that?
I hope all you snowflakes can handle that. Okay. All right.
Look out.
All right.
Next week, my host will be.
All right. So I think Come Together by Ike and Tina is a better song than Come Together by the Beatles.
Okay.
My question for you is, which covers are better than the originals?
Oh, there's tons of covers that are better than the originals, right?
Yeah. Let me hear your list.
Okay. Yeah. I probably could think about Beatles covers that I think are better than the originals.
Okay. What else?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say better than, but I'm just I'm a big fan.
What would you rather throw on?
Yeah. And in fact, I can probably do a playlist on this. But
this is like
this is highly playlistable.
This is like down the middle playlist material. I have a lengthy list.
All right, here we go. Marvin Gaye's version of Yesterday is killer.
Okay.
Nobody's ever heard it.
Yeah.
But like I bought like the Marvin Gaye 4-disc, box set years ago when I don't know, in the 90s or something when it came out. And that was just randomly on there. It must have been some B-side or something, and it's killer.
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder's We Can Work It Out. Classic.
We're like in a groove here.
Yeah.
This is all like
soul
60s,
covers of the Beatles.
Yeah.
Okay.
60s.
Booker T and the MGs did an entire cover of the entire Abbey Road album. It's called Macklemore Avenue.
Wow.
But it's just instrumental Booker T and the MGs doing, like Come Together, the whole bit,
That's great.
Mean Mr. Mustard, the whole like medley, the whole thing. And it is awesome. Big fan of that. I'm just going to stop there because that's about as good as it gets.
Yeah, this is off topic. I don't think this is better, but have you ever heard the Angelique Kidjo album, Remain in Light? The full cover of the Talking Heads, Remain in Light?
Yeah, I know what it is, but I don't think I've listened to it.
It's quite good, and it's very interesting because she's like an Afrobeat musician.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like Talking Heads album, which was like an Afrobeat almost appropriation that she's retaken. It's very interesting.
We're stealing it back.
Yeah, we're taking it back.
Got it. Okay, I'll check that out. Is that so? Covers of whole albums that are better than the original albums.
I don't think Angelique.
This is gonna be a long list.
It's mostly Fish discussion.
Okay.
This was this was a backdoor way into discussing.
Once again, you've catfished me into discuing Fish.
Fish Halloween concert.
Please let this bit end.
I don't know. I've got a band twofer. The band twofer.
Okay.
One, the band's Atlantic City is better than Springsteen.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
But Aretha's The Wait is better than the band's.
Okay. Well, Aretha's anything is good.
It's better than anyone else's anything.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So there you go.
It's just this cycle where the band cover is better, but the other. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Got it. It's like Inception.
Yeah. It had me thinking because Ike and Tina, they certainly had some original music, but like a great deal of the songs that they are most known for are not just covers, but like covers from songs that were like 2 years old at the time that they were covering.
Like Proud
them.
Mary.
Yeah, Proud Mary was like 2 years later.
Yeah,
right?
like recent. Yeah.
Yeah. We got to bring that back.
Yes. That was like everybody in the 60s, the 50s. Like, it was just like...
You hear a song and you're like, oh, that song slaps.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do
that right now.
We should play... Let's put that in our songbook.
Yeah,
know?
like Jimi Hendrix famously, like, Sgt. Pepper's came out on like a Thursday or something, and like 2 days later, Paul McCartney went to see Jimi Hendrix at some club in London, and he played the song Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts. It was like, it had just come out.
Yeah.
And like everybody was apparently in the audience. Whenever you hear these stories about Jimi Hendrix playing in some club, like Eric Clapton and Paul McCartney and Pete Townsend were all there. Like, I guess they just had nothing better to do than to hang out at the club.
Right.
So...
And these,
and that was just a cool thing to do.
Totally. And even bands that were like not part of the pop culture world.
Yeah.
Like the Grateful Dead in like 67.
Sure.
Start playing Dancing in the Streets.
Right.
It's like, they're like a garage band from San Francisco at that point.
Right.
That are just like pulling a song off the top 40 charts.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, there were just fewer songs that existed then.
That's true. It's true.
So like, you either wrote some songs and then you got to... People played like, that's the other thing is like bands in those days or any kind of artist would be like, yeah, we played, 9 hours a night, 8 days a week. Like they played all the time and they never took a minute off. So like you could only write so many songs.
I also wonder if it is a bit of a remnant of like Tin Pan Alley culture where the idea of playing somebody else's music didn't carry anywhere near as much stigma.
Right.
Like you didn't have to have a creative genius who was part of your band.
Right, of course.
It was perfectly fine to be Ike and Tina, you go see them live and they might play 3 originals.
Yeah.
Or to go see Linda Ronstadt and see no originals.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's kind of like if you're looking at the mid to late 60s, whatever, like, yeah, the Beatles had kind of established, they only really became like full-time original songwriters like a couple albums in.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan's
Rolling Stones.
first album was all covers. Right. So like, maybe 65 was when that kind of was established. Like, hey, you can write your own songs and sing them too. Yeah. So like by 67, 68, like it's still kind of a new idea.
Yeah, exactly. I referred back to Tin Pan Alley, but it's actually probably goes back more to like the American folk tradition.
Sure. Yeah. We're just going to take this all the way back to the mists of time.
Anyway, that's my question for you on Ike and Tina.
Okay, good, right. Good relevant topic. So while we're on the topic, let's talk about the movie Tina, which came out in 2021, directed by Dan Lindsay and T.J. Martin, who are a team of mostly documentary directors. Mm-hmm. And it is, of course, about Tina Turner. So just kind of like, back of the VHS box, how are you going to describe this movie?
Heavy watch.
Heavy watch. Okay, in quotes.
That would be like heavy watch.
Andrew Keats, Rock Docs podcast. Heavy watch,
comma podcasts about movies about music.
Yeah, exactly.
So like the story of Tina Turner's life is like part of popular culture now. So
right.
No surprises here, but it is quite visceral.
Yeah,
and hangs over the film, even in its more fun moments. The complete tragedy of this woman's life is like a specter over the movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, in terms of this is our third episode. This is the most traditional rock doc we've seen in terms of like, this is a biography of a person's whole life from like when they were a little kid to like now they're old and retired. This is the story of their life in 2 hours, beginning to end. Like it's a biography.
Yeah. Begins with a 5-minute sprint through the person's life.
Right.
Restarts itself with some pacing.
Yeah.
In their childhood home.
Right. And this is, in classic rock docs fashion, starts with black screen, cheering crowd. Then the, video comes up and Tina comes out and she's like on stage in front of 100,000 people and she sings one of her big hits and, and then it kind of like fades into like, back when she was a little girl in Nutbush, and so forth, and kind of goes through that whole story.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of getting into it. I threw this on. This is an HBO movie.
HBO Max. Yeah, it's an HBO product. So like,
which I still don't know what HBO Max is. Maybe you've.
It's just HBO, but Max.
Okay. Well, now I get it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I mean, I guess it probably ran on, like, if you just watch HBO on cable, it probably ran on like Sunday night at 9:00 or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there are anyway. We're getting sidetracked, but I think there are products that are only on the streaming service.
Maybe so. Okay, we'll table that.
Okay.
So like, I put this on, and I mean, I know about if you look up spousal abuse in Wikipedia, there's a picture of Ike Turner.
Yes.
Like, that's just what you know about Ike Turner, is that he tortured Tina for decades.
Yeah.
And knowing that, but like, still, I put this movie on. I feel like the HBO brand is a luxury and like high quality filmmaking, right? Highbrow. Yeah. And it's kind of like, if you were a person who like spent thousands and thousands of dollars on a suit, you would expect it to feel just like even more comfortable than a t-shirt. Just like, like, it's almost like that. It's like you for, $17 a month can like have access to this luxury. Like, I think of the show Succession or other shows, like, just highbrow, high quality. And it's going to be, to an extent, it's going to be challenging, but in a middle brow way, but also comfortable, right?
Expertly produced.
Right.
Clean.
Yeah. No bumps.
Yeah.
So I'm watching this movie, and I kind of just expected, all right, we're going to have like a little bit of that, drama with the husband. And then, we'll get mostly into the, like, what's love got to do with it, triumph of her career and all that stuff. And it was not that. It's sort of that, but it's also not that, right?
I would totally agree with that. Yeah, it's not exactly that. For one, the first act is like half of the movie.
Right.
They spend most of the time in the 60s.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've got going back, to her childhood and all that stuff. We can get into that. But, I mean, just to kind of get to the meat, I mean, they get really, really into what she dealt with Ike. And it is heavy.
It is heavy.
I mean, we're talking about, like, rape, torture, you name it. The guy was not a good dude.
Yeah, and I think to their credit,
I think that's a strong take, but
yeah,
yeah,
a lot of people getting canceled tonight.
Yeah,
no, I think it's to the film's credit though that they don't pull the punch at all.
No,
this is a story about Tina Turner, which means you're going to dwell in the fact that she was a prisoner,
right?
And they really, I don't know if I got into a frame of mind where I was thinking, oh, this woman lives in a prison, but they are hammering over and over the extent to which she's being tortured by this man for a very long time. And it's throughout the time of their fame together,
right? Ike and
Tina's fame together. There's never any indication that she had a community with the Supremes.
Right.
Or with anything else that was going on in music, that they were out touring, and there were other bands on the bill, or they were in the same city,
hanging out with Otis Redding or something like that.
There was no indication of that.
No.
She's at home for 4 months taking care of their kids when she's getting beaten every night, and then she's on the road, and he is treating her like a kidnap, like somebody who's been kidnapped, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And here's the thing. So the movie,
it even starts with their introduction, which she plays it in her recollection. She plays it romantically,
right?
Sort of,
yeah.
But she says that she was so young, and that it was like a familial love, and that they were like a brother and a sister,
right?
And then that became romantic love,
right?
We would now call that
grooming.
We would now call that grooming.
Right.
And I think the filmmakers put a spotlight on that. They were intended to see how manipulative it was.
Yeah. Now, the thing that they kind of lied over is, like, she apparently, when she met Ike, she already, like, had a relationship, and I believe had a kid.
Yeah, they just mentioned that later.
Right.
Like 20 minutes later.
Right. She wasn't like, she had some exposure to the world.
Yes.
But yeah, so they get into all this, and just kind of the chase. I just kind of felt like, So they're showing all this, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a story of her life, and she, eventually, is able to just basically escape. Like she literally like runs across a freeway into a motel.
Again, with part of this like prison depiction.
It's like literally like a hostage escaping.
Yeah.
And she like runs in this motel and all she has is like a gas station credit card or something like that. It's in the 70s. And she gets the like hotel owner to like, give her the suite for, the spot for the night. And, she's staying. And anyway, she's building her life back together. And then, so that's like probably the first half of the movie. Then what happens is just kind of going through her story, which I wasn't all that familiar with. She then was kind of on her own with the kids. The only thing she essentially kept in the divorce was her name. Like her name was not originally Tina Turner.
Anna Mae Bullock.
So apparently Ike named her Tina Turner, and like literally she like showed up one time at a concert or something, and he's like, and here I am with Tina Turner, we're Ike and Tina, and she's like, who's Tina? Like, he just made the decisions. This is not a consultation where they were, throwing this up on the whiteboard.
Yeah. And so one of the talking head segments is a director who created a musical, a Tina Turner Broadway production.
Yeah.
And she, I think, correctly acknowledges that in their divorce, eventually, skipping ahead a little bit, she doesn't fight for any of their money, any of their possessions. All she takes in the divorce is her name.
Yeah.
She gets to keep being Tina Turner.
Right.
And the Broadway producer theorizes, and I think is probably right, that was like an act of recapturing that.
Right.
Just reclaiming herself, that this guy had the audacity to change her name, and now she got to make it her name.
Right. And just, I can't help it. This is my own world. And say like, yeah, she was smart. She held on to the intellectual property.
Yeah.
Like,
true. Okay. So yeah, David's an IP lawyer.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, that's right. That's valuable. The brand is what's more valuable than like the Cadillac or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. So she basically, the story is she goes through that. All right. Then she's struggling. She's trying to kind of figure out what she's going to do with her life and her career and scraping some money together, playing shows wherever she can, Vegas. This,
she's
that,
like,
and the other.
She's like a Vegas showgirl.
Right.
And then, not showgirl. That's not the right word, but she's a
Vegas
act.
entertainer, but not necessarily a high profile one. It was just like to make a buck.
Yeah.
And then she is convinced to kind of tell her story because people are asking like, where's Ike? Like she appears on some cheesy 70s talk show and they're like, hey, where's Ike? And it's like people didn't know. Yeah. Like they literally did not know the whole story.
Right.
So she's convinced to go to People magazine and tell her story about, the abuse with Ike. And she really believed at the time that she was going to tell her story. People are going to be like, all right, cool. And then move on. And she was just going to be Tina Turner. Everybody forget about Ike. Well, no. Then that just becomes more and more of a thing. All they're asking about is Ike.
Now, every other publication wants to call her and get her to basically say the same thing.
Right.
But to them.
Right. Relive her trauma. Yeah. Right. So then, then she hooks up with some producers who believe in her. She ends up having these enormous hits in the 80s. Like, What's Love Got to Do with It? Etc.
And that relationship with that producer is really interesting. It's like a unique artist-producer relationship that you've seen that seems very genuine.
Yeah.
Very healthy.
Yeah.
Very productive.
Yeah. Somehow.
Very much he just believed in her. She just happened across this not as incredibly successful guy when she was not especially a marketable name.
Yeah.
Who believed that she was a rock star.
I mean, if this story...
And she believed she was a rock star.
If the movie's to be believed, she lived for 20 years with, like, a monster.
Yeah.
Like, who's just short of a, like, mass murderer.
Yeah.
Which is true. We know that's true.
Yeah.
But then, after she broke off with him, instead of doing what a lot of people do, which is just repeat the same cycle, like... Essentially every other relationship with either professional or personal that she's had since then has been extremely healthy and positive.
Yes.
Which is great. Like, if that's true, that's not a usual story.
Yeah, she gets remarried and she seems to have this
greatest guy.
This very beautiful marriage with this guy much later.
The producer, the songwriter she hooks up with who writes What's Love Got to Do with It, like just seems like a chill, nice guy who like got where she was coming from and worked with her to help her like find the heart of the song. Anyway, she becomes huge, but all anybody wants to talk about is Ike. So Kurt Loder from MTV comes along. I'm a huge Kurt Loder fan. Shout out to his book, Bat Chain Puller, which is one of the first books I really got into about music. It's great. So he basically pitches to her and her people like, hey, you should tell your story in a book. Like, okay, that article wasn't enough. If you really want to own this, you got to write a book. And maybe we could do it together. And so one way or the other, they end up co-writing this book. I, Tina becomes a huge bestseller and blockbuster book all about, her escape from Ike and all that stuff. Still, all anybody wants to talk about is that. Then they make the movie, What's Love Got to Do with It, with Angela Bassett. Again, it's all about that. That's the whole move. That's the whole thing, right? And she even there's like fascinating footage of her at the press junket for that movie where she's sitting next to Angela Bassett and they're like, well, what do you think of the movie? She's like, well, I haven't seen it. And they're like, what? And she's like, well, I don't want to go sit in a movie theater and watch myself get abused. I lived through it. And it's like,
all I'm doing is trying to get out to be done with this.
Right. That's why
what I want is you people to stop asking me about this visceral nightmare that I lived through for 20 years.
Right. This is while she's selling tens of millions of records. Like she is an independent person who's extremely successful. And all you hear about is her ex-husband. Then
not
you get
the finest hour for journalists.
No,
this film.
No, I mean, journalists. So, okay, then anyway, just kind of getting there. Like there's a Broadway play about her life, and I mean, and then really, I mean, there's the movie we're watching, right? So this is where it kind of got interesting. Was I'm like, I started to feel uncomfortable. As though I, a person who's watching the movie and now, in fact, podcasting about it,
are doing the same thing.
We're doubling down. Like, are we participating?
Yeah.
Are we being indicted here? Are we participating in this cycle of abuse and forcing this person and the people around her, her children, her other family, whatever, to relive that experience by participating? And so the movie, just as a viewer, was really interesting from that perspective. Like, I'm like, I can't imagine the filmmakers didn't think about this.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, they never come out and say, like, hey, you, viewer, watching this movie, you're part of the problem.
Right.
But it seems kind of underlined. Like, it just seems like it's there if you're looking.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly hammer the point that she keeps doing all these different things to try to put this baby to bed.
Yeah.
And that now she's 80 years old.
Right.
And she's still telling the story.
She's retired in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Living in a $1 zillion mansion,
right,
with her great husband, and surrounded by gold records and everything else.
Yeah,
and here she is being interviewed talking about Ike Turner.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, and I think I had a less fully realized version than that, which is that the Angela Bassett movie today is just a documentary.
Right.
You just don't. You don't even have an Angela Bassett movie.
Right.
You just do this documentary in 1993.
Right.
And like that's like I think something that's like basically eating sports movies alive right now.
Right.
Is like 30 for 30 exists.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
You don't need to do Miracle anymore.
Right. Okay. So rock docs, as we define them, have destroyed the biopic industry. Mm-hmm. They still seem to crank them out though.
I guess Straight Outta Compton came out like 4 years ago. So what am I talking?
Yeah, there's tons of these things.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so it was just really interesting to feel like I settled in to watch this, cool, chill HBO documentary, high class, high quality, which it is, in terms of the production. And yet I was made uncomfortable in a way that I didn't expect.
Yeah, I think So if I'm honest, I was also very uncomfortable, but I was more uncomfortable in a less introspective way, which is just that it is hard to hear what she lived through.
Yeah.
Like I find myself saying out loud multiple like, oh God, like visceral reactions, audible reactions.
Right.
To what she's describing.
Yeah. I mean, all rock docs have like some rise and fall and, you know, there's drug problems or there's this or that, whatever. I mean, all these types of like life biography, like there's always, and it's not just going to be like one success after the other.
No, but I don't shield my eyes at the idea of like Joe Walsh being like, boy, was I partying hard.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. So here's similar to this. And I think this was deliberate from the filmmaker is there is so little Ike Turner in this movie.
Yeah.
He is barely in this movie.
Yeah.
And when he's in it, he is because he's used so sparingly and the way he's used and the way they're describing him and the very clear-eyed, explicit depictions of what she was living through, when he's on screen, it's like a menacing specter.
Yeah.
Hanging over the proceedings.
It's like most of the original Jaws, you never see the shark.
Yeah, it's exactly.
You know? You hear the music, dun-na, dun-na, and you see a little fin.
Yeah.
But because of they didn't have like good special effects back. They had issues with the shark, so like you barely saw the shark, and that's what made it creepy and scary.
Yeah,
he's the shark of this movie,
and you can tell. And so people older than us can maybe say if this was a really common understanding, but the way it comes across, their appearances together was played up as that Tina was the cutesy, charismatic front person.
Right.
And Ike was this brooding genius.
Right. Yeah.
And he was basically silent on the couch next to her in the late night show.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't play like like Page and Plant.
Right. He's not just the quiet one.
He's not the quiet one. It plays menacing.
Yeah.
It plays scary.
Like he's sitting next to her to make sure she doesn't mess up.
Yeah, exactly.
And all this is played against this tons and tons of performance footage. That vintage.
And like in another world, this is a fun watch.
Oh my God.
Because the performance footage is so good.
Yeah.
And I have something I'd like to go down on this road on.
Let's go.
There's a lot, there's a lot of rock docs you watch where you enjoy the footage.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel shocking.
Right.
It doesn't feel outside of what you would expect to be happening at that moment in music.
Right.
You watch Wilco and it's like, wow, what a great mid-90s alt-rock band.
Yeah.
Right?
They're good.
But this is like a few other rock documentaries where it's like, how does she exist?
Right.
How in the mid-1960s, early 1960s even, does Tina Turner, that version of Tina Turner, dancing like that and singing like that, dressing like that, bombastic and owning the stage like that, where does she come from? It is so early in the history of American music. It is so much earlier than you would imagine seeing that footage. That footage looks like it comes from 72.
Right.
And it's 63, it's crazy early.
It's incredible. And based on what they say in the story, again, who knows what?
Yeah.
It's kind of sounds like she walked on stage.
Yeah, both of them have it, it's so early in American music that Ike Turner's career can be, my mom knew B.B. King.
Right,
so
exactly.
I went and played the guitar for him, and he was like, well, you should record music. And so
because you own a guitar.
And so I recorded the first rock and roll song.
Right, exactly.
That's a story told in this movie.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And Tina Turner's like, I went down to the club.
Yeah.
And I met Ike Turner, and I told him, can I sing?
Hey, you just invented rock music. I want to get in on that.
Can I sing now? And I came back the next night, and the drummer put a mic in my hand.
Right.
And then I was in the band.
Right.
And then a year later, it's like the way people talk about seeing Elvis on TV for the first time. That's what this footage of Tina Turner is like.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think there's no way for us to, if you haven't seen this movie, there's no way for us to make it sound like we're not overselling how good she is.
It is.
There's no possible way,
especially because
incredible.
We're a bit enthusiastic about the subject matter.
Sure. We've been known to enjoy a rock doc.
But I say that it's a heavy watch because the specter of this abuse is hanging over everything.
Right.
But there are moments where you can forget about it.
Right.
Because Tina Turner is throwing her limbs around the stage like an alien.
Right.
That happened to come to this world where we had roughly the same music.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I guess comparison would be,
Elvis. Elvis is the one that I kept thinking about.
But in terms of just that dynamic, I mean, it's kind of like when you see footage of really young Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
We were like, how is it that there was somebody that good ever at anything in the history of life? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But also, that it was not a pleasant scene when he got off stage. No matter how good we watch it and we're like, this is a 10 out of 10. There's no universe in which this is not incredible.
Yeah.
He came off stage and his dad beat him because he missed a step by a millionth of a beat or something.
Yeah, and it is now impossible to watch young Michael Jackson footage without carrying that with you.
Right. You can't just be like, hey, he's doing,
look at him dance.
ABC. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So it is kind of like that in that sense, but and contemporary to that time period. But I mean, I think the beginning of this podcast, we got into the dark side, but the just for the sheer entertainment value, the performances are unbelievable.
Yes.
And that's kind of something I wanted to get into because there's a reason why that was maybe I don't know if surprising the right word, but like we were both kind of taken aback. And that's because it just so happens that she at like age 45 or something became the biggest pop star in the world with these like 80s songs, like What's Love Got to Do with It and stuff like that. Like she had this like second act that is unprecedented. There's nobody who's ever done anything like that. Like, yeah, there's people who were like kind of stars. And then like years later that like Steve Winwood like kind of became a bigger star in the 80s when he was old. Like, okay, but it's not the same. That's not like Tina Turner.
Or like classic rockers that have a second act, like Carlos Santana or whatever.
Yeah, but this is a whole nother level. I mean, I remember like I was born in 76, so like What's Love Got to Do with It comes out in like 84, 85, like so I'm like 8 or 9. Yeah. Listen to the radio in the car with my mom, whatever. Like, I mean, she was as huge as a Prince, a Michael Jackson, a Bruce Springsteen, like the people of that time, Madonna, like that's really those were like the 5 people that were like the biggest things in the world at that time. And like, I think it's kind of a problem that like maybe the music hasn't held up so well. Like, I don't, I'm not saying like, I don't, I'm hating on What's Love Got to Do with It. It's a good tune. Like if it comes on at the CVS, I'm like, yeah, this is a good tune. I'm not having a bad time listening to it, but it's not like something I'm personally throwing on or the like music fans of the world are. And all the artists I just listed, like Prince, Michael Jackson, Madonna, like, for all their complicated legacies or whatever, like they're extremely respected musicians and their like big hits are considered to be like, I mean, it's like, hey, if somebody's just getting into this kind of music, like you got to check this out.
Right.
I don't think people think of her big hits that way. And I think it was so big that it erased the maybe better music or more compelling music now that she did for a long time in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, unfortunately, with Ike.
I got to tell you, spent a lot of time over the last week listening to Ike and Tina.
Yeah.
More than I ever had in my life. I knew the hits, basically.
Yeah, sure. River Deep, Mountain High.
Yeah. God damn, they were good.
They're so good.
They were so good. And like, Ike seems to be an actual monster.
Yeah.
Like there's a clip of him in 2000.
Yeah.
With an opportunity to like give his views on the situation.
Right.
Every bit the monster at that point that you would have expected based on what you're told he had done.
Yeah.
Right? So, a truly disgusting man.
Yes.
He had fantastic taste in music.
Yeah.
His arrangements were very tasteful.
Yeah.
And the way he played the guitar, he has a great guitar tone.
Yeah.
Really sparse, really interesting, like Chuck Berry riffs, basically.
Yeah.
And with Tina's voice on top of it, it is so good.
Yeah.
And like dozens and dozens of songs.
Yeah.
That you could listen to Ike and Tina for hours.
Yeah.
Without being remotely bored.
Right.
And I think you're right that her 80s music doesn't hold up like that, really. Although I will say that they have this European producer that gives her What's Love Got to Do with It.
Right.
And they show what the song was for the first band that had recorded it.
Right, which just kind of seemed like an American knockoff of ABBA.
Yes, or were they European?
I think they were American, but it was like 2 guys and 2 girls, and they were like wearing the spangly suits. It was like the late 70s, early 80s, very ABBA vibes.
Definitely doing an ABBA
but
thing.
not good. Not in a good way.
And it's like, it's really interesting to as like an example of the twisting paths that a song,
right,
a piece of music written by somebody that then relinquishes control of it.
Yeah,
that it can be recorded by this band and be a completely forgettable piece of like 80s pastiche trash.
Go to YouTube and just type in original "What's Love Got to Do with It?" Whatever, and find that original video of those guys doing it on Star Search or whatever.
Yeah, and then
it's not great.
And then the version with Tina with the feathered hair.
Oh yeah,
and the big red lips.
Yeah,
belting it.
Yeah,
and it's like, all right, that's kind of a good song.
yeah. I'm not. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, like, if she had never had that comeback, and if she just had left Ike, great, established herself, been kind of an oldies act, and gone on, and that was it.
And she was what she was doing, doing Vegas stuff and Hollywood Squares.
If she had just done that, which would have been fine, like, she would have been remembered and spoken of by like music nerds as like in the company of like an Otis Redding, Wilson Pickett, like all these great, incredible soul artists from like basically the 60s, 50s, 70s, but like mainly that 60s era. So not like the slicker Motown stuff, but like the down home soul type stuff. Mm-hmm. And she would have been like respected and remembered in that way.
Yeah.
But because she had this like unbelievable selling tens of millions of albums success, and that's what everybody knows, like that's kind of the image that sticks. And so, I'm glad that this movie gave me the opportunity to like go back and, I'd listened to some of it, but not really, to that extent to like really dig into it. Cause it's like, you name any classic soul singer artist from the 60s, that era. Yeah. She was as good as or better than any, like, I don't care. Unbelievably good.
Yes, absolutely. So maybe this fits in here. Phil Spector comes in, produces this fantastic album with them.
Yeah.
That doesn't hit.
No.
Hits a little bit in Europe.
Yeah.
And
basically she went from Ike Turner to Phil Spector.
Yeah.
Possibly the only person worse than Ike Turner because he literally murdered somebody.
Yes. You're right.
Much as I tried, he never quite crossed the threshold.
Yeah, boy, she did have rough luck with musical visionaries.
Yeah.
But both of them made fantastic music that she absolutely ripped.
Yeah, exactly.
But so Phil Spector's insight was Tina's the star here.
Yeah.
Right? He puts her front and center. Phil, Ike
he literally shipped Ike out and like got him wasted and threw him out of the studio.
Yeah. Right. And there's a clip that I'm sure it was intended this way, that looks like Ike getting his revenge on Tina because the album hasn't hit at this point.
Right.
It's a failure. It didn't even reach the charts. And he's saying, well, this wasn't a black album.
Right.
This was an album with 2 black stars made for white people. But the black stations are only going to play it if it hits on the white stations.
Right.
And the white stations aren't going to play it because it's made by black people.
Right.
And so it has no audience.
Right.
And then he says, but, Europe didn't care about that, so they played it. The UK specifically played it. Now, I think he's trying to be hurtful there. I think he's trying to twist the knife with Tina.
Right.
Hey, this guy that everyone thought was a genius came in and he wanted to elevate you and he wanted to sideline me and it didn't work. But I also think he's probably not wrong about the racism of the American radio.
Oh, he's totally right
at that point, right?
He's also right in the sense that Phil Spector, everybody was falling all over themselves to talk about how much of a genius he was.
Yeah.
Which, okay, sure.
Yeah.
But here's Ike Turner producing unbelievable records.
Yeah.
And
that did hit on black stations and white stations.
Yeah. And nobody was calling him a genius. Like nobody was giving him the kind of credit that Phil Spector was getting. Now, nobody knew in the background how much of monsters either of those people were.
Yeah.
But just in terms of the records and the performance and what was happening on the record, like, yeah, I think he was not taken seriously. Nobody was looking for him to produce other artists or other things in the same way that Phil Spector was like, come play with work with the Beatles. Work, anybody could, would be happy to work with Phil Spector.
Yeah. And I just am ignorant of this, but I don't think Ike Turner had an 80s career where he was brought in to produce people.
No, I don't think so. I think, he was kind of probably seen as past his prime.
Yeah.
He actually lived in like Carlsbad until he died, or Encinitas, as I recall. And he used to play at this like little bar in Encinitas. But I mean, I never went to see him. But like, yeah, I mean, he kind of made blues records, and like some of them were like, one of them won a Grammy. They said like, you know, best contemporary blues album or something like that. Like he was still doing stuff, and had fans or whatever. But I mean, I don't know if it was just because of all the news that came out, or because it was past his time, or because he was so drug addled that he couldn't get it together. But yeah, I mean. There's no Ike and somebody else. He didn't go and find another Tina Turner.
Right. I don't know. Are you enough of a music historian to feel comfortable saying is Rocket 88 the first rock and roll album? First and roll song?
Rocket 88?
Rocket 88.
I mean, I don't know. You know,
it's probably there around with some other stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, somebody listening to this is like, no, it was another thing from 1948, and I'm not remembering that off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was in an era, but you know, I don't know. That's not that interesting to me, if I'm being honest. Like saying, well, no, this was the first rock and roll record. It wasn't this. Like, sure.
Like, no. This was the first one to do these 3 chords in this such way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like if you have that podcast and you're out there, you know, making your claim, I will listen to it and enjoy it, but I'm not getting into it. I don't have that like encyclopedic knowledge in my head.
Yeah.
A couple of things were interesting that struck me about the movie. One is that, I mean, these are the choices you have to make when you're making a documentary, right? So she has a bunch of kids, some with Ike, some with other people. She basically raised them all, even though some of them, I guess, weren't biologically her kids. They were Ike's kids. She kind of took them all, you know, under her wing, apparently. And
she outlives her son, Craig.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's like the end of the movie is like the last 20 minutes is just this like victory parade of her being honored and every, you know, Oprah falling all over herself to like talk about how great she is, and she has all this success, and she retires, and she's living in Switzerland with this great husband.
Play.
It's Broadway play. And then at the end of the movie, they say, you know, dedicated to Craig Turner, like whatever to 2019. And I was like, wait, that was her son, right? They mentioned him earlier.
Yeah.
And it's like her son, I guess, committed suicide, I believe. During the time this movie was being made and edited, and they never mention it. They never mention any of that. It's just like, it's very like, I get that it doesn't fit the narrative of the movie, and I understand, like, especially because probably this was like when they were literally making the movie, like assembling it, editing. What, you know, like I don't know this sequence, but you know, it wasn't like this happened years before, and so it just struck me. It really struck me as weird, like to just not mention that or not mention the issues. And she does open up about the fact that she was not there for her kids a lot, and she regrets that.
They tell her, they say it on camera. She was gone for 8 months of the year touring. I mean, she was not like
they're not making
They was not a part-time musician.
No,
and this was not now when you could like do 10 festivals,
right,
and get a tour's worth of revenue.
No. She was doing 2 shows a night on the road, different town every night.
Yeah.
You know, probably
doing,
you know,
third tier towns.
Right.
You know,
dealing with Jim Crow and God knows what else.
Yes.
And so, yeah. And, you know, she wasn't FaceTiming with her kids.
Like totally. Yeah. So I do wonder, we mentioned about the current documentary industrial complex, the world of,
which we were a key part of,
which we're latching onto. We're drafting off of. It's a big part of what we got here. But so I don't think this is a clean version of this, but the Michael Jordan documentary where Michael Jordan has essential final say, over the end product, and LeBron James has a documentary,
more or less produced the whole thing himself.
Yeah. I do kind of get the vibe that Tina Turner was like a creative partner in this movie. And I wonder if she was like, I do not want to talk about my son who just committed suicide.
I get that.
That is not part of this movie.
Sure.
You know?
I mean, this is clearly an authorized biography.
Yeah,
this isn't some like, you know, off-brand thing. This is the Tina Turner like stamp of approval all over it, which I get. So yeah, that could be the reason.
Yeah. But it hit me with like a ton of bricks. It's just like, You're starting to warm up to the idea that in the end, she got to have a happy life.
Right.
In spite of her saying multiple times throughout this movie, I did not have a happy life.
Right.
I mean, she says that like multiple times. Like,
yes,
it was, I had an unhappy life. And then it's like, oh, she outlived her son. You know,
Right.
like
Yeah.
As bad a thing as can happen to a parent.
Yeah. On top of everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, just kind of getting back to the way that she addresses issues and like a lot of musicians are very expressive in their music, and then when they're interviewed, they're super lame, or or like some musicians are a good interview, quote unquote, because like Bruce Springsteen or something, like they just have a bunch of stories and shtick that they can pull out, and it's entertaining.
Yeah, but Bruce is always doing Bruce, right?
He's always doing the character of Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah,
but she's very forthright and direct.
Totally.
And
it's mesmerizing to listen to, actually.
Yeah, for somebody who, like, you know, admittedly didn't have a great upbringing. Her parents both abandoned her.
Right.
I mean, we're not even getting into all that of her childhood neglect and all that stuff. You know, didn't have tons of education, all that stuff. Like, she is extremely expressive, forthright, like
self-possessed.
Like totally knows what the deal is. And like you do feel like you're getting the real person when she speaks.
Yes,
like either she's extremely good at putting that on.
Yeah, I was gonna say if I'm not, she is really good at putting it on.
Yeah. Like she knows what she wanted. Like when she met her husband, she knew exactly. You know, her second husband, who she had a great relationship with. Like she knew exactly what she wanted. She's like, "Hey, you're cute. Come over here and tonight we're partying."
Yeah. So also to put how like. Her age, I mean, like this is all happening so much earlier in music,
right?
Than it exists, at least in my mind,
right?
And to put that in the context of American history, like her parents are sharecroppers,
right?
She is like working in the fields,
she's picking cotton,
yeah. That's,
I mean, she's like 80 now, so we're talking about the 40s.
Yeah, she's older. People, she is older than. Paul McCartney, Jerry Garcia, Mick Jagger, Bob Dylan, Paul Simon. She's only 4 years younger than Elvis.
Literally nobody is older than Bob Dylan. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she came up in the segregated Jim Crow, way pre-civil rights era South.
Right. And then to do the music she was doing, it's like, it's just, there's no precedent. It's not like a remarkable performer that exists on the trajectory that like is riding the curve of where music is going.
Right.
It's a jump. It's a leap forward.
Yeah.
That moves music ahead.
Yeah.
I could watch her concert performances with no talking head segments.
Right.
For hours.
Yeah. But and I feel like hopefully the one thing about this documentary is people see it, that she gets her due in that way, because I do feel like you just don't hear about her in the same way as you do other legendary artists of either the 60s or the 80s.
Yeah.
And, it's like, she had some big hits, but it's like, kind of like a cheesy 80s thing. Like, okay, that's all right,
Yeah, so
it's
here,
like We Are the World or something.
I was sort of struck by when I was watching it. I guess this is our annual episode segment where I mentioned something different, something about the age gap between us.
Yes.
In this case,
because I'm almost as old as Bob Dylan.
Right. I didn't know like the Ike and Tina story is such an embedded part of popular culture that I didn't pick it up through reading about Ike and Tina. I didn't pick it up because I knew the book, or even because I saw the Angela Bassett movie, or because I was a student of music or something. Right. I picked it up because it's a throwaway line in Liar Liar with Jim Carrey.
Right. Eminem talks about it.
Yeah, and I was like, what? I don't understand this joke.
Yeah.
I'm like 12 years old, and it's just like,
who's Ike and Tina? Yeah,
what
it's
is
like
he
an old
talking
reference.
About? Yeah, it's an old reference. And then I realize now it's like, all right, that movie came out in like 96. Angela Bassett movie came out 3 years earlier, which is in the grand scheme of things not that much, but when you're 12, it seems like a lifetime ago.
Right.
And a few years before that, the book came out. So it's like an easy reference to make that everyone's going to get in a movie theater in 1996.
Right. Sure.
That as a kid I saw, and I was just like, what are they talking? What are they talking about?
Yeah, it's I mean, it's.
You got to say now in retrospect, not that cool of a joke.
Not
She really went through some shit.
Yeah, Jim Carrey. Come on. Yeah. Own up to that. Come on this podcast. Defend yourself.
A third person getting canceled tonight, Jim Carrey.
If you do not come on this podcast, it is over. It's I think it's the kind of thing where like the comedy, the turning that into a target for comedy. Yeah. Because it's just a thing everybody knows was a. Yeah, I mean, I just remember that in the 80s and 90s was a thing, and now,
which I mean, I guess in the 90s, like Michael Jackson kid jokes were, like,
oh my god,
currency of the
Michael Jackson kid jokes were also popular in like 1985. So I'm here to tell you, as somebody who was 9 years old in 1985, we were ahead of the curve on that.
Interesting. Okay, I did not know that.
Just breaking that news.
All right.
Yeah. So just like kind of bringing it all together. Bring so. Something I want to ask you, like, just generally speaking, months from now, if somebody mentions this movie, what just comes to your mind? Like images, things that were interesting, just random things that popped into your head from this movie.
There'll be two things. The two things that are on my mind. The first time when she describes him beating her with the shoe stretcher.
Yeah.
And then raping her.
Yeah.
Is so dark.
Yeah.
It's so heavy.
Yeah.
It'll stick with me like the first time you watch Requiem for a Dream and you see him without his arm.
Right. You're like, okay.
Like it's a big thing. The other is like some of the grainy fast cut footage of her and the Ikeettes.
Yeah.
Kicking out and doing the what do they call it? The pony.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's just like, I know what I know about that era, and I cannot believe that a black woman was dancing and singing like that at that time in this country.
Yeah. It's incredible.
It's incredible.
It's
great. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the weird thing for me, which is just like kind of a weird little 2 minutes of the movie, but it was just kind of interesting, was she talks about her Buddhism, right? So it's like in the 70s,
it never goes anywhere.
Yeah, she was introduced to Buddhism, and you see her talking about it, contemporary, and she's talking about her mantra, right? And she starts to repeat this mantra over and over and over and over again, as you would, and then they intersperse, whatever movie making words that I don't know. They're,
that you a film school graduate.
Yes, exactly.
Totally know.
Yeah, exactly. No, there's sort of like a montage of her dancing and singing, and there's kind of, you can hear the underlying music, but then you also hear layered on top of that her repeating this mantra over and over and over again, and it's all kind of played together as this like psychedelic moment.
Yeah,
and it's really interesting. And I was like, this movie is taking an interesting turn. Yeah. They're doing a thing here. And then it's never mentioned again. And it's like, I don't know. Maybe she just wanted to throw that in.
It is important to her.
It's
but the
important to her
filmmaker
story.
Didn't know what to do with it, really.
Yeah, but she doesn't really get into the fact that, like, okay, like after I left Ike, because of my Buddhist study, I did X, Y, and Z. I went to speak to somebody. I did meditate, whatever. It's just not mentioned again. It's just the subtext. But there is this like weird, just tripped out moment in the middle of the movie where like it's like the filmmakers were just like going crazy with the editing. They're like, maybe we can make this work. And it's cool.
Or another way to think about it is sometimes you just have great copy.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what am I going to do? Not put this in the movie?
Right.
I'm going to make this
reciting her mantra.
She's reciting her mantra, and I know what I can do with it. I can lay it on top of her music.
Yeah.
And that it's going to work.
Yeah.
And you're telling me because I don't know where to put it, I just shouldn't have it in this film that I've been working on for 5 years?
No, I'm dying on that hill.
No, that's going in. So the Rock Doc podcast can tell us that it didn't go anywhere.
Who cares?
I'll live with that. I'll take the hit.
All right.
So I have one last thing to say. So the People magazine segment, the headline that they plaster on top of it every time they mention it is the woman who taught Mick Jagger to dance.
Yes.
And I was much like when I saw Liar Liar, I was like, what is this about? I was like, does everybody know that Tina Turner taught Mick Jagger to dance.
I mean, I've heard that.
You have heard that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I did not know.
Like if you cornered me a year ago and you're like, Dave, who taught Mick? I would have said Tina Turner. I did know that.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I looked into it a little bit.
Yeah, please. I have not researched it or done any fact checking at all.
So I looked into it a little bit, and it sounds like the Rolling Stones, and she talks about the Rolling Stones a lot.
Yeah.
When she's like doing her comeback bid, she basically wants to be the Rolling Stones.
This is a whole other interesting side part of the movie is when she talks about in the 70s, they're like, yeah, you're kind of like an old R&B singer. And she's like, I don't want to do that. I want to be a huge rock star playing stadiums like the Rolling Stones. And meanwhile, she's playing like tiny little rooms in Vegas.
Yeah.
And everybody forgot about her other than the guy who was with Ike, the woman who was with Ike. And she had this vision, apparently, that she was going to be a huge rock star. And she's like in her 40s and she's a black woman. And there's nobody else who, by any stretch of the imagination, meets that description who is doing what she wants to do. And then that is exactly what happens.
Exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Right down to like playing to 100,000 plus people in a stadium in Rio.
It's always in Rio, by the way. So here's my theory.
Every concert in Rio is 100,000.
No, my theory is that Brazil has one concert venue. It's the stadium in Rio. If you want to see any concert, you have to go there with 100,000 people. Doesn't matter any band.
There's like some like plucky young kids from favelas that are like, well, we all know how to play some instruments, and we're like, can you fill the venue?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no, you don't get to play.
Because if you watch a lot of rock docs, there's a lot of big concerts in Rio.
Yes. So I looked into it, and
teaching Mick Jagger how to dance.
Teaching Mick Jagger how to dance, and what it sounds like is they were playing a show in L.A. in the mid '60s, mid to late '60s, and it was actually what it said. And the Stones went and saw them, and were blown away.
Sure.
And they were just like, they're incredible.
They saw in real life what we saw in this documentary.
And they were like, this band is incredible. And if you know anything about the Stones' taste, this
is right up their alley.
Right up their alley. You can't
This is what they've been trying to do for 60 years.
Yeah, this is what they stole. This is the more genuine version of what they ended up stealing. And so they bring them on tour.
Right.
And they go play a handful of shows with them. And Tina's version is that they were backstage, and her and the other girls taught Mick to do the pony.
Got it. Okay.
And she says, but he never admitted it. All these years, he's never admitted it.
Okay.
Mick has been asked in multiple interviews, if I can tell, that he seems like he always tells the same story, that his mom taught him how to dance when he was a little boy.
Okay.
And that he used to dance with her, and all he knew how to do was to make sure he didn't step on her feet, and he danced like a crazy person. His brothers told the same story. Mick says, my mom taught me how to dance. Tina says, nah, I taught Mick Jagger how to dance.
Okay.
Sidebar to that.
Okay. Getting deeper.
9/23/66.
September 23rd,
September 23rd, 1966. The Rolling Stones headline, Ike and Tina next on the bill, the Yardbirds under that.
All right, 1966 Yardbirds. This is still probably the Clapton era.
Page.
Oh, was the Page? Clapton already left?
Yeah.
Okay.
And at Royal Albert Hall.
Okay.
Hell of a show.
Yeah.
Hell of a night of music.
Take me back to see that one. I'm down.
Yeah. I would love to have seen that British crowd in between the Yardbirds, which are like, the biggest post-Stones, Beatles band in London at that point.
Right. Guitar wizardry,
yeah.
Inventing the guitar hero.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah. And in between those two, you get Ike and Tina.
Right. It must have hit like a bomb. Like they'd never even heard of anything like this before.
Yes, exactly. And Royal Albert Hall, to bring us back to episode 1, the not actually site of the Royal Albert Hall Bob Dylan show.
So are you positing that this movie exists in the Rock Docs extended universe?
The
cinematic universe of Rock Docs. Yes.
This is how I've connected it.
That was a long walk, but I appreciate it. If nobody else, I appreciate it.
So we do need to connect that, though. So there's a famous Dylan show.
Yes.
In his
Yes, there was a famous bootleg called the Royal Albert Hall show, but it was not actually at the Royal Albert Hall.
There was some
Union Hall or something nearby. There was a show at the Royal Albert Hall that he played like that week, but that wasn't the one on the bootleg.
I believe there was some licensing problems with the release with the production company that was associated with the other venue.
Right.
So they just had to call it the Royal Albert Hall.
Okay. This has nothing to do with Tina Turner, but interesting.
But this was the show where he is called Judas.
Right.
And he says, I don't believe you. Right. You're a liar.
Yes.
Anyway,
the Tina Turner Rolling Stones Yardbird show you mentioned. If anybody has a bootleg of that, please.
If you were in the taper section and you've still got one,
if you have a clean soundboard of that, just please send it my way.
Yeah, I'm in.
I'm ready for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know this is gonna be a weird one, but somebody who's not like particularly knows or cares that much about Tina Turner, do you recommend this movie? Hey, I want to see a rock doc or whatever.
Honestly, maybe not.
Okay.
Maybe not. Like,
it's too heavy.
It's too heavy. I think there's like the number of people that I would have to really be comfortable that whoever I was recommending this to had not experienced any sort of domestic violence trauma in their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it's
any sort of stranger that I or
right.
person, associate that I don't really know what happens in their personal life.
Right.
I would not blindly recommend that you watch this movie.
Yeah. Like I mean, I feel like you got to listen to this hour-long rock doc discussion to understand the context.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like a great movie about the issue of domestic violence.
Yeah.
And also a movie that has tremendous, incredible music performance.
As good as you're going to see in a rock doc, honestly.
Yeah. And so it's not that it's a knock on the movie, but like just, hey, you want to throw on a music-related movie to relax on a Saturday night. This is a heavy one.
I always say that like one of the things I like about rock docs is like in a room of 10 people, you can put it on and people can have conversations and it's like a good background.
Yeah, this
would be a really bad thing for
this is a party killer.
This would
is it both a party starter and a party killer, depending on what scene you're at.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah, you'd be like sprinting to the remote, be like, skip this scene.
Yeah. So it's not a slam on the movie.
No, I mean if you like love rock documentaries, you're like
if you're prepared for what's going to be
movie.
involved, it's really well done and it's compelling.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not a just hanging out, chilling.
How many seasons of this show are we going to have to get to before we're like, don't like it? Don't recommend.
I've never seen a bad rock doc. But
no, yeah, exactly.
The premise of this show is that eventually we're going to find a bad one.
Well, if we're still doing this, who knows how many episodes from now before we're like, well, we've watched all the ones we like, but what else is out there? Does Real Big Fish have one?
I've never seen Bittersweet Motel, so I don't know. I'm just saying.
Dude, if you don't like, all right, fast forward. The season finale of this season is going to be Bittersweet Motel. And if David
is about the band Fish.
And if David doesn't like it, good news. The show's over.
Yes. The first and only season. Yeah. And we will never speak to each other again.
So if you found this show years later and you're like, wow, I really like this. I'm listening to them in order. And it ends at 9. Congratulations, Dave hated Bittersweet Motel.
We shall see. Okay. Since we're professional podcasters, we should mention that this has been Rock Docs. We can be found on Twitter and Instagram at RockDocsPod. And our next episode will be about the hip-hop group A Tribe Called Quest. So there you go.
Beats, Rhymes, and Life.
Beats, Rhymes, and Life. And stay tuned for that, Rock Docs fans. Bye.